Wee woo, wee woo, wee woo. Emergency warning. Emergency warning. This is an emergency podcast. Banlist announcement update. Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as CEDH. I am one of your hosts, Lyndon, aka Noobzors, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Matt, aka Null.
Hey guys, what's up?
Reed, aka Sick Robot.
How you doing?
And Morgan, aka Spleenface.
Hey everyone.
And from that intro, you might be guessing this is a impromptu recording in response to the most recent Banlist update for our format. And there is some stuff to talk about. So let's not dilly-dally anymore. It's Paradox Engine was banned. I mean, Iona was Iona was also banned and Painter Servant was unbanned, but Paradox Engine banned. And as a CDH podcast, that's what we care about. So let's just get this Iona Painter Servant junk out of the way. Iona banned. Does this affect any CDH decks?
No.
Not at all.
Cool. Moving on.
Good ban for casual though. Unhealthy card. I think everybody has complained about it at some point, so it's nice to see it gone. To be consistent on that front.
If we're gonna make a comment, like, okay, Iona is a card that's makes for unfun game states. It's not a unique card in this effect. Cards have been banned for this before. Leovold or I guess Arayo is one where, you flip it early, counters your stuff. Not fun. Cards still exist in the format that are legal. Like there's Void Winnower. There's lots of white stack
nothing,
effects. Yeah,
nothing is targeted as Iona, which is nice.
Yeah, this one, what makes it worse than a lot of the others is just that you can pick one person, particularly if they're on like a monocolor deck, which a lot of casual players are. Just be like, nope, you're gonna sit out while the rest of us play Magic.
Yeah. So it's definitely in line with some of the philosophies that people have attributed to why they ban cards. And, for that, for banning cards that are oppressive in that way, solid ban for casual. And speaking of Commander philosophy, this and the philosophy of the ban list, along with the ban list announcement update, the Rules Committee also published an update to their philosophy document that they worked alongside the CAG, which is the Commander Advisory Group. So that's the group of all the content creators from the community who they, handpicked to be their, council, their hand of the king. And yeah, they've got an update to that philosophy document. We'll link that in the show notes of this podcast. But a brief summary is that they give, I think, was it 7 criteria for why?
7 criteria for banning a card. Or, sorry, it includes cards which easily or excessively fit one of 7 criteria.
And I guess while we're at, let's just read out the 7 criteria.
Sure. They are cause severe resource imbalances, allow players to win out of nowhere, prevent players from contributing to the game in a meaningful way, cause other players to feel they must play certain cards even though they are also problematic, are very difficult for other players to interact with, especially if doing so requires dedicated narrow responses when deck building, interact poorly with the multiplayer nature of the format or the specific rules of Commander, and lead to repetitive gameplay.
Wait, significant resource imbalances? But
yes.
Okay.
Divination incoming ban. Yeah, there's and they said themselves in their announcement with this philosophy document that not all cards are going to meet these criteria that are currently on the ban list, and not all cards that they would consider have to meet all the criteria. So it really kind of makes you wonder what, if they're not really going to adhere to the criteria, what are they for? I mean, they all sound like decent rules of thumb in principle, but it's not something that, it's not a set of rules that can be uniformly applied to figure out what should be banned, or at least that you can't use those set of rules to arrive at the ban list that we have or future bans. But yeah, so I think we're spending
a lot of time on that.
Yeah, let's move on to Painter's Servant, which was unbanned. That card, that start that was added onto the ban list. It didn't start on the ban list, correct?
I don't actually think that's right. I think it was originally on the ban list because the way certain rules worked with regards to
color
like if you
identity.
made mana that wasn't your color identity, it like became colorless as it entered your pool, so you could lock people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it's been stuck on the ban list for a while because Sheldon himself has stated in the past that he does not want to allow Painter Servant and Iona to be in the format at the same time because that creates a one-sided lock. And I'll make a quick comment on that. I don't think that that's really a reason to, you don't really need to ban Iona because Painter Servant is coming off. There are much stronger.
I don't think that's what they did.
No,
though.
he has stated pretty definitively in the past, though, on his Twitter that he would not let these two coincide in the format. So,
well, but he also said that the printing of Ugin cemented Painter Servant's place on the ban list. Like he has said on Twitter recently that he's shifted on that based on input from particularly members of the CAG.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to say that kind of 1-2 combo with Painter Servant and a really expensive CMC wise creature or Planeswalker and Ugin is not a unique combo, and in fact there's cheaper combos that we'll get into with Painter Servant that do just close out the game for at least one person.
Yeah.
That being said, though,
they've specifically been threatening an Iona ban for a while, or like not threatening an Iona ban, but discussing it as a problematic card for a long time.
That being said, I like, even if we just take the the opinion or the stance at face value of these two cards can't exist in the same format, I agree with them banning Iona and taking Painter Servant off, because Painter Servant has a lot more opportunity for making, like, doing cool things with it, and like not just being consistently terrible to play with in a casual context.
Yeah, fair enough. So the combo that I was briefly alluding to about more efficient Painter Servant combo that can remove one player from the game, that would be Painter Servant plus Grindstone. So Grindstone is a 1 CMC artifact with a 3 CMC tap ability that mills the top 2 cards of target player's library, and if they share a color, repeat this effect. And with Painter Servant's ability, that is a combo that will mill someone out. Not really CEDH viable.
No, not really.
It is a colorless combo, right? Like, it certainly has that benefit.
Yes.
That doesn't necessarily mean it's CH viable, but it does provide some flexibility. There aren't very many pure colorless combos.
This is true.
Yeah,
but that being said,
I mean, anything with white or black already had a better version of this combo that exiled cards.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, mono blue or something, but...
And even then.
Yeah, so then if Painter Servant plus Grindstone is not good enough, does Painter Servant affect CDH in any way at all?
I've seen it specifically discussed in two contexts so far.
What are those?
Being, so primarily Hackball.
Okay.
It's a hack. You play it, you name blue, and it makes all of your green creatures into blue-green creatures. So it's effectively a hack that is tutorable off of Momir, tutorable off of Willy Tutor and that stuff. Costs 1 less than Vizier the Menagerie if you pair it with a 1-mana mana dork to get started, and doesn't lose to Grafdigger's Cage unlike Vizier. So that's pretty nice. I've also seen it in consideration for Animar to give Animar effective protection from all colors.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So this is a 2 CMC hack in Hackball, right? Like that's tutorable with Momir.
Yes.
So-
And so the big ones that were just so it's effectively an auto include. We've been looking at Painter Servant for basically since Hackball came together as like if any card got unbanned, we would like this one the most versus like any other deck in the format, just because it adds a lot. It means that Neoforum turns Dorks into a hack, which is sort of nuts.
Oh, that's big, yeah.
Yeah. It means that you have redundant tutorable hacks out of the command zone when needed. And you just, it's just a really nice addition to the deck. It doesn't solve the base problem of Momir being 5 mana, but it's nice to have. But yeah, I personally have only seen the real application in those 2 decks.
Well, I mean, at least it's something, right? You know, you're not going to see a card like this that's a really niche effect, not likely going to see play wide play in CDH unless it's a really efficient combo or just generically good. But the fact that it even has a place at all, that's worth noting. So
yeah, definitely.
But my Painter Servant Reap combo is so good.
Okay, everyone, get all of your
Get
meme
back
Painter
Settle
Servant.
down, folks.
Okay, let's get it out of the way. Okay, Painter Servant Life Force Control. Huh?
Painter
Huh?
Servant Compost, just get the Gitrog player every single time.
No.
Wait, you want more free counterspells? Painter Servant Disrupting Shoal?
Oh my god.
Painter Servant Tidal Control.
That's it. I'm gonna
Just
we're
Painter
gonna
Servant plus
I think we're
everything.
done.
We're-
Yeah.
we're cutting it off there. And let's get into the actual meat and potatoes of this announcement, which is the Paradox Engine ban. People were not happy about this announcement.
Well, some people were happy.
I feel like not a lot of us were happy in general.
I don't think very many
CDH
people.
players generally weren't happy.
Pretty not
Yeah,
happy.
if I was-
I was kind
fairly,
of looking
but-
around the Magic TCG and the EDH subreddit, and honestly, I think the majority opinion is that Paradox Engine is a fair ban. So I'm talking the non-casual scene as far as I'm concerned. Sorry,
Yeah.
the casual scene.
Oh, yeah.
Pardon.
Yeah, if you look on the competitive subreddit, the competitive EDH subreddit, on the Banlist announcements, I think there's 400 comments on that thread.
Something like that.
Something crazy.
424.
Yeah,
We
and,
are effectively all in mourning right now of losing this card.
and some people are going through the different stages of grief, and
I know, I did.
mostly anger.
Oh my god.
Most
A lot of us got stuck
Yeah,
there.
mostly anger. No one's really moving on from that, and a lot of it is directed right towards the RC in Sheldon. Yeah, so I think people have, at least competitive players, have reason to be angry about this ban. Mainly
Yeah.
on the effect it's going to have on the meta. We're losing 2 decks. And if you guys have listened to our Thrasios Timna episode, you know, those 2 commanders are taking over the format in terms of representation. So losing any decks at all that are viable is press F to pay respects.
Don't forget
Yeah,
our
it's just-
Untap and Win podcast too.
Oh yeah.
Those two. It's really just like we're just like having the diversity chipped away from our format right now, sort of, is what it feels like. At least with this banning. Is like gradually getting anything that's not 4 or 5 colors stripped out and being replaced by generic commanders.
Yeah, well, and so Arcum and Sisay are decks that are just straight up dead from this, or at least like they're relegated to high power at this point.
Without Paradox Engine and without another printing of something like them, they're effectively not competitive anymore. It's very difficult to actually win the game with either of those commanders now.
And these are certainly not the only commanders that were affected by this ban. If you look at the deck list database, you see I think I saw and someone did a quick analysis of the amount of decks that ran Paradox Engine, and it was something like 25%.
Yeah, a lot is getting hit by this.
Yeah,
But
so
yeah, specifically,
it hits the format as a whole, and the decks that aren't running Paradox Engine are basically smiling, thinking to themselves that all my competition just got a little bit worse.
yeah, pretty much.
And one of those decks is Hulk,
yeah,
which certainly did not need any help.
I do just want to say though, like, just before we move on from this, I'm personally just really sad to see Sisay go.
Yeah,
just because I know a lot of the people that have worked on it, and it's a deck that's had, since Paradox Engine got printed, it's had so much love and so much work put into it by so many people.
I even had some contributions to working out of some Sisay lines. I know when
yeah, even Lyndon contributed.
I helped with remove Garrick from their most recent boat arc line by featuring, but you could put Kasali underneath the boat. But you know what? None of that matters anymore. Rip
it's just
Sisay.
sort of all down the drain. I do think I've been saying this all day today, but I think that Sisay will be back with a vengeance if we get access to a Maybe or a Wishboard rather.
With
CDH,
Karn.
just because you can one tutor go get Karn Muckosymphylatus, which is not as good as Paradox Engine, but is an actual win condition unlike she has now. But yeah, in the meantime, she's just sort of relegated to high power at this point.
Okay, so let's kind of delve into where this ban came from. Because the rules committee does not. They've stated many times in the past that they're not balancing for competitive. They're not paying attention to competitive EDH players. They're focused solely on the casual side of the format. And
I think the better way to say it is like as the non-competitive, because there certainly is a gap between casual and competitive in my mind.
Yeah, and it's quite large.
Yeah.
There's like we talked about mid power, high power. And I think Matt, you're on the money there. Non-competitive is their focus. And if we take a look at this ban from the perspective with that sort of idea in our heads of non-competitive focus, it really does make some sense. This has been one of the most called for cards to be banned on in quite some time. Looking on Twitter, you follow a lot of the rules committee personalities or CAG members. Paradox Engine gets brought up all the time. If you look on the EDH subreddit, brought up all the time. On the Command Zone podcast, they have an expression: "Is Paradox Engine good?" To the method they use to evaluate cards.
The answer
is it
yes.
better or worse than Paradox Engine? Yeah. So it's not coming as that big of a surprise. They've talked about it. It's been on their watch list in the past.
Yeah, effectively, like since the card got printed, it's I think been a contentious card in the format.
So, what reasons do they really have for banning Paradox Engine?
Well, I think this is one of those cards where the way we see it played in CEDH is actually a lot less painful than the way it's often played in casual. Because typically in CEDH, Paradox Engine is a card that ends the game that turn. But when everyone is typically just casting a couple spells a turn, they don't have all the efficient rocks, they're not running stuff like Top or Thrasios, or Paradox Engine is a card that it just means you can take really long turns doing way more stuff than all of your opponents for like 3 turns or 4 turns or 5 turns in a row before the game ends. Like taking up half or more of the game time for, 30 plus minutes until you actually win the game.
For those who haven't necessarily
just sort of
played against a lot of Paradox Engine, the equivalent ban is, in the mind of casual, is Prophet of Krufix, where, just as Morgan mentioned, it's not just taking a long time with your turns, it's taking a long time with other people's turns.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
really
it's
just
just-
gives you free reign to do whatever you want mana wise. And if you're building your deck chock full of instants, then you really do get a Prophet of Crew effects like effect. Prophet definitely enabled that a bit easier. But Paradox Engine does have its own unique set of things that make it worse than Prophet, especially because if you're on your turn just chaining cantrips together.
Also, specifically the Paradox Engine triggers are the big one, the cast triggers, where when you're not necessarily used to having a Paradox Engine play, or it's not like something that you've practiced necessarily, like most people playing it at a less than competitive context will be playing it with. Just the fact that you have to, whenever you cast a spell, go, oh right, I also have this thing on trigger that makes me have to go through and count all my mana and float a bunch of it, and then oh wait, okay, sorry, I have to go and untap all my stuff now and then resolve the card, okay, and then you repeat that like 5 to 6 times every turn.
Yeah, and one of the things that that got Prophet, and one of the criteria they used is just its ubiquitousness. It is so easy to build a Paradox Engine deck or to slot it in. So I mean, it's not an auto. You can't just slot it in and like Prophet and have it be a 1-card engine. It does require a bit of build around, but the build around is very minuscule, and it's often things you want to be doing anyway, which is ramping.
It's the same level of it's actually like sort of the same level of ubiquity as Prophet, in my opinion, where like the barrier for playing Prophet is play creatures, and the barrier for playing Paradox Engine is play non-land mana sources. And neither of those are very difficult things to do.
Yeah, fair enough. So it's not really shocking from a casual perspective. But let's really sort of delve a bit deeper into the effects it's going to have on the overall CDH meta. So the deck with the namesake, PST, Paradox Scepter Thrasios. It's just is it just ST now? Is that where we're at?
Is it just Scepter Thrasios? Is it just Thrasios all on its own?
It's either going to ban Scepter, it's just going to be T.
No, it's gonna be Painter's Servant Thrasios.
Wait, isn't that what it stands for?
Yeah. So where does PST go from here?
So having talked to both Shaper and Sleepy about this a bit and watched them explain their choices, the PST deck has already sort of been leaning into Consult recently. Anyway, they've been looking at just slotting it in for a myriad of metas. Anything that's not like like the fastest of fast race metas is something where like they've, I think, been wanting Consult more and more. So I think that the obvious slot in is just going to be a Labman consultation package where the Paradox Engine used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you preserve your sort of cards that win the game. You're not going down on your win conditions too much. And Consult has definitely been picking up in popularity just in all sorts of decks.
You're definitely
Very
slotting in a
condition.
combo that is also, in my mind, more resilient than Paradox Engine, so it might be a step to the side, but I think it's actually a step in like the right direction.
Yeah.
The one thing that I'm kind of sad about Paradox Engine going is that there is just sort of an uptick in the trend of running Retraction Helix or Banishing Knack.
It never got fully explored.
It never got fully explored because I think in green-based decks, it's a solid piece of removal that you can use for a single blue mana, answer something that needs to be answered without having to worry about, the classic risk of Chain of Vapor getting shot back at your own stuff, right? So sometimes a tempo loss, or like if you're playing a Zur deck, and you Chain of Vapor and then someone has to bounce back your Zur, that's quite annoying. But the Banishing Knack, being able to bounce or answer a permanent, but then also having it be a combo piece with Paradox Engine, because it gives the ability to a creature of tap, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So, you just keep rebuying, some rock or cheap dork, untapping, making infinite mana, and, going off. So that is definitely a sad part about Paradox Engine going. That was just that was just on the up. Just on the uptick.
Rip Banishing Neck.
Rip Banishing Neck. So what is there a replacement for Paradox Engine beyond PST? So like in the other Paradox Engine decks, so like just to name a few, you've got mono green Selvala, you've got 4-color Rashmi. What are these kinds of decks looking to do instead of Paradox Engine?
Things like Paradox Engine, like Adnaz Storm decks, stuff like that. Well, I know for one, it's a pretty large loss for 4-color Rashmi. We just have like a very small set of win cons, and we really don't want to go anywhere else with them right now. We were pretty happy with having Paradox Engine plus Top plus Thrasios and then like Scepter and that kind of stuff. So we're still going to go back and figure out what to actually slot in because it's not immediately apparent right now. It may end up having to be something like Lab Maniac and Consult, but it's still going to have to be worked out over time and discussed.
With a lot of decks moving towards, maybe considering Consult packages, Tainted Pact, is this going to be like a mini renaissance for Blood Moon decks? As even more decks move towards, well, first of all, we're losing, you lose Arcum, you lose Sisay. I know they're not a massive meta share, but that's a mono blue deck, so that's not a deck that's going to be hated on by Blood Moon or Back to Basics so much. Sisay 2-color, not a super greedy mana base, so not going to be feeling that as bad either. Are we going to see Blood Moon Back to Basics have a nice sort of comeback?
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we're not going to see. We're going to see a fewer strict artifact-based combo decks, but we're not going to see less artifact-based mana. And if the artifact-based combo decks aren't being stopped, then most decks are pretty free to just slot in artifact-based mana, which makes them particularly resilient to things like Back to Basics and Blood Moon.
I don't know. I feel like
to say. Oh,
I mean, I was just going to say, I think that the Blood Moon Back to Basics thing is hard. Like, it works in theory, but in practice, it's not fast enough to shut down Flash Hulk, which
that's the kind of benchmark.
Didn't get hit at all by this, so it's still like you're going to tap out for Blood Moon, they're going to tutor in response, and then they have to make one blue mana, and then you Blood Mooned everyone else, so counter magic is scarce.
Yeah, super taxed. That's sort of like the consistent issue with Hulk decks now, is that like it's good against specifically Breakfast, but you can afford to slot in basics in a lot of the other Hulk decks, and it's just rough to have them either nat draw a basic or early fetch one, and then you just have to be scared of the flash the whole game. I do think that Blood Moon Back to Basics are on an uptick recently, though, and I think it probably warrants a bit more exploration with just the amount of stuff like Nagila, especially with Food Chain getting a boost recently.
Yeah, and also, so many more decks are just going full on deep into this the Tainted Pact mana bases. Zur used to be a high, like seeing a lot less high tide decks and way more Tainted Pact decks. Zur, Kess, and then even some 2-color decks like Gitrog are experimenting with Tainted Pact. So, I can definitely see those being successful punishes for that kind of meta shift. But yeah, so speaking of Hulk not getting hit by this ban at all, is this just gonna massively increase the meta share of Hulk are people who are, their deck's gone, they're going to go move to Hulk, or with PST, getting a bit of a hit, going to CST, or are they just going to switch over to Hulk?
I think so. This is my opinion and sort of a prediction for me for what's going to happen, but I personally think that Hulk popularity is going to pick up, in mostly in online metas. I think in paper metas, people are very resilient to change, and we're not going to see a lot of change in the way that people play in paper, except for
all the Sisay players.
The actual dead decks.
One thing I want to say is on the Reddit, I saw so many people just saying like, "Oh man, I just finished foiling out my Sisay deck," or "Just built Sisay 2 weeks ago."
Wedge has been building the deck for about 2 years now. Getting it completely set up and finished, and then just got a foil Weatherlight, and then this happens.
God, that's brutal.
But yeah, so I don't think metas are going to change in paper that much. Again, people are resilient to change. PST pilots aren't going to switch off of PST suddenly because of Paradox Engine ban. They're just going to switch over to Consult and play that instead. But what I do think is going to happen is, especially in online metas and proxy metas where people don't necessarily have that barrier to swapping decks, I think people are going to pick up Hulk more. And I don't think that's necessarily because of an objective power level difference. I don't think PST is losing that much power from this ban. It's losing a bit, but I don't think it's losing like a significant amount. I think it's just going to be the perception of the deck losing power is going to push people to switch decks.
Well, but I mean, also, like, though PST and Hulk have been sort of two decks dueling for, a lot of people, pretty much everyone thinks one of those two decks is the best deck in the format. And, when you're that close, even a very small shift in power could push a decent number of people towards saying Hulk is the best deck in the format. And then when people ask which deck is the best in the format, the question gets answered with Hulk a lot more than PST. And then, like, that also shifts it. Like, when they're so close, a small differential can actually have a very magnified effect in popularity.
I can definitely see that one too.
Definitely worth considering. So that's right, guys. Everyone should be packing their Graph Diggers cages and extirpates.
I mean, if you weren't already, but
yeah.
If you weren't already,
running a deck
definitely should now.
That isn't Hulk. That isn't running a Graph cage in the current year. Come on, guys.
And Lyndon loves people who run extirpate, isn't that right?
Okay, I'll throw Lyndon a bone here. Extirpate is getting a bit less useful now, but should still probably jam it just because Quicken and Breakfast is a thing.
Oh yeah, that was sweet innovation. But yeah, so does Paradox Engine, beyond just the WinCon package, does it affect the way people are going to build their decks? Like, do they run less rocks, move to dorks, anything, or vice versa?
I don't think I'm going to build a deck that doesn't have both Graph Digger's Cage and Curse Totem in it for a while.
So I definitely think that on the meta side of deck building, as in building into the meta and not building to counter the meta, I think people are definitely going to be switching more toward dorks. There's not a lot of reason to play a not dork deck now as like your default deck choice if you have the option. If you're in green and in multiple colors, you should probably be on dorks just because, like the main reasons you'd be on rocks is for Paradox Engine shenanigans and Adnos shenanigans, and half of that just went away. So I think people probably are going to be leaning into dorks more. But that being said, rock decks still great for countering dork decks. Clasms are still pretty great.
Yeah, and then the whole dork decks running Null Rod, Stonies, or Collector Roofs. It's a never-ending cycle, man.
Yeah.
I think the trend has been towards dorks, for a while now, even before the Paradox Engine announcement. People are just the fact that Timnas are so pervasive and dorks can just turn into drawing cards, cantripping, very powerful.
Blocking other Timnas.
Dorks are just consistently faster than rocks, right? When your rocks are your signets and talismans, right?
Yeah.
Where as your dorks are coming down on turn 1 and setting you up for 3 mana turn 2, versus you're tapping out on turn 2 for 4 mana on turn 3. Big difference.
I mean, the one synergy that the rocks still have is the various, like particularly Crypt and Soul Ring. Like the fact that they're cast for colorless mana means that when you have, like the turn 1 land Soul Ring Signet opener is still pretty real.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, so one thing that we want to talk about before we sort of close out the topic on Paradox Engine and this announcement is what could have they done to maybe help this go over a little bit smoother? And that would be to ban Flash. If they had banned Flash, I think that would have appeased the competitive crowd quite a bit. And this isn't just, out of nowhere that I'm saying this, because some of the members of the competitive community have been talking to CAG members, whispering in their ears, following them on Twitter, in conversation threads, saying, making the case for Flash ban, that it's something that doesn't affect casuals much, and would really help build rapport with the competitive crowd, because this is something that many people want to see gone to help bring balance to the format. And, it's not like the CAG members who've been getting all of these cases made to them didn't bring this up to the RC in their meetings. In fact, I think it was Shivam and Rachel who brought it up, or they said they brought it up to in their meeting. They brought up the fact that the CDH crowd was really, angling for a Flash ban, and gave a pretty solid reasoning, which is, that's awesome. Awesome that the competitive community is getting a voice through the CAG members, but unfortunately, I guess it just wasn't enough.
We couldn't get there this time.
Yeah,
which is slightly frustrating, because if we go back to their philosophy document and we look at those 7 criteria that they're looking at, let's see. Cause severe resource imbalance. No. Allows players to win out of nowhere. Absolutely. Prevents players from contributing to the game in a meaningful way. Absolutely. Causes other players to feel like they must play certain cards, even though they're also problematic. Absolutely. Are very difficult for other players to interact with, especially if doing so requires dedicated narrow responses when deck building. Absolutely. Interact poorly with the multiplayer nature of the format or specific rules of Commander. This one's debatable. The fact that it's instant speed is much more of an advantage in a multiplayer format, but even if we say no, we're still at 4 out of 6 so far, and the last one is lead to repetitive gameplay. Absolutely. So it ticks 5 out of 7 boxes on their reasons to ban a card, which I think is probably the most of any card.
Oh yeah.
Like with the exception of ones that no one thinks should be unbanned. Like, I don't know, Caracas or like
Fast Ballinger.
But like it's just like it, and it's not just that it meets those criteria. It's like some of those criteria it meets the most out of any other card in the format, i.e., allow players to win out of nowhere. It definitely fits that criteria more than any card that is currently legal in the format.
Yeah, people talked about Paradox Engine letting players win out of nowhere.
Try 2 mana and instant speed with no board presence.
Yeah, it's just there's nothing like it. And no, I'm kind of holding out hope that the RC hasn't, said the final word, given the final word on this issue, that they're still kind of hearing arguments and stewing over it a bit. So maybe we'll hear more from that on that front in the future. And I certainly hope we do. I would love to see a Flash ban. I think it would be a great move to help mend the wounds that have sort of been inflicted on the competitive community, or at least they feel were inflicted on them.
Yeah, honestly, like I'm not gonna like try to speak for the whole format here or the entire community, but I personally am not as mad about like purely the Paradox Engine ban as I am about the fact that they banned Paradox Engine and did not also ban Flash. I would
It seems like a clear oversight.
It's
Okay, I want to read out Shivan's tweet because it's particularly compelling to me. CDH friends, I tried really hard to convince the powers to ban Flash, but it wasn't to be. I'm sorry. It just seems like so much effort was put in to banning Flash, and then Paradox Engine was banned.
Yeah, I know. I was, saying how awesome it was for Shivam and Rachel that they're listening to the community. But I just want to give an extra special thanks to Shivam because he is not a competitive player, and from what I gather from his Twitter, he does not enjoy that side of the format at all. But he is willing to listen, take what the competitive players are saying, and give us a voice and speak for us in front of the RSC. So, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
and obviously,
I mean,
Rachel, thanks a lot too. But I mean, she is already competitively inclined, so
yeah,
maybe not so much.
Standing up for people that you don't necessarily agree with how they play the game, or you don't necessarily enjoy playing how they play the game, but still making the effort to try to understand their concerns and try to stand up for what you think is correct. I mean, big hand to Shivam for that, really.
Yeah. So even if it didn't work out in the end, or at least for this Banlist announcement, thanks for trying anyway. Yeah.
Also, I will say I don't know if Josh Lee Kwai, like if he advocated for it at the meeting. It sounded like he was just kind of against bans in general. But he did say on one of his recent episodes that in his listening to competitive players, he's come to understand that like Flash is, like he said, like that's the card he's most heard competitive players say they want banned. They were talking about what's the best deck, so he said maybe it's some Flash Hulk deck. So at least he's certainly listening, even if he felt that he didn't need to advocate for bans at this time. Just listening and actually performing some level of analysis and understanding why it is that Flash is actually quite a healthy ban, because it doesn't do fair things, and I think anyone looking at it honestly will admit that. So anyone who, even if they don't particularly have much skin in the game, is willing to look at it, analyze it, and understand, gets points in my book.
Absolutely. Yeah. So branching off this, the Flash ban, I did see that get mentioned a lot. That, my God, Paradox Engine was banned, but Flash is still existing. Come on, we should have a separate ban list at this point for CDH. And that was a common sentiment on Reddit, or the CDH subreddit, even on the r/EDH subreddit. I was seeing people. Yeah,
there are a lot of people,
and on Facebook, all over the place,
all over.
When I was walking on the street and I heard a guy yell at it, was so weird.
So splitting the format. This isn't the first time this has been brought up.
It's also will not be the last.
It will not be the last, but this has been the loudest I've heard this.
This sentiment, yeah.
Yeah, in a long time.
So I think that the people expressing this sentiment they're conflating two different things. I saw a lot of comments sort of along the line of basically, oh, the rules committee's, just going crazy. These bans are out of left field. Oh, they're not, they're totally out of touch. And I don't really think that that's true. They've been talking about Paradox Engine for like 2 years, and they're are a huge number of people who want that card banned. In fact, the professor from Tulane Community College put out a poll asking people if they agreed with the bans. 55% of people said they agreed with the ban of Paradox Engine,
which is a lot for any given ban.
Which is a lot for any ban. And I think that people are sort of looking at this as, we didn't think Paradox Engine was a problem, therefore now that it's banned, it feels like it's out of nowhere. When really, lots of people thought it was a problem, and this is clearly something that's been in discussion for a while. So this isn't a case of the RC just sort of going crazy and banning stuff for no reason or out of nowhere. You know, if in the next 3 banned and restricted announcements they also banned random stuff, then maybe that would be a sign that, you know, they're not being appropriately cautious. But this is...
Well, I think that's... If they started banning random stuff, that would be a sign. Well, it obviously depends on what they ban. Paradox Engine, they've stated that they're focusing on the casual side. So when competitive players say, you know, oh, why are you banning Paradox Engine? You know, it's not that bad. Well, that's not their focus, right? So I don't think you can justify saying we should split the format because they banned Paradox Engine for casual. I think what is worth considering if you're trying to make that case is that they are not listening to competitive players, and something that would be such a slam dunk of a ban as Flash, which doesn't affect, or which would barely affect casual play, but would really help competitive play. So if they just decide to completely ignore all of these outcry for Flash ban, for the ban of Flash, but they're listening to the Paradox Engine ban, maybe you're starting to get into a bit more acceptable territory where splitting the format doesn't seem as crazy.
But really, even then, people always, like, when they get riled up about this and they start firing up Reddit posts and start firing up their typing fingers on Discord, I think a lot of people still don't necessarily consider all of the downsides that come with splitting a format and all the problems and issues that come with that.
Yeah, I mean, also this ban list announcement was today.
Literally today. We are recording this the
people
day
have not
of the
had
ban
time
list.
to cool off yet, right?
Yeah.
To think about it.
Wait, are you suggesting that Reddit and Twitter in the immediate aftermath of
are not
a controversial
entirely
decision
accurate?
Absolutely not.
There's no way. I always follow the general sentiment on Reddit and Twitter for all of my opinions. Is that not the most accurate way?
Reddit is how I make up my mind.
I just straw poll people in the Discord every day. Guys, what should I eat for breakfast? Here, straw poll.
Yeah. So Reed, you were saying something about
there's so many downside, and we've seen format splits happen a lot, and we've seen it fail so much. I think people really just have to remember like what happens when you split a format, and you really have to weigh the benefits, right? Things like, so the big examples of what happens when you split a format, and the closest that we get to actual EDH are the 1v1 EDH formats. Just huge backfires, right? Like how many 1v1 formats for EDH have we seen just completely die because either they mismanaged the ban list once, or just like didn't cater to how the players wanted the ban list to be, or whatever else, and then just everybody left that format and went to another one of the 1v1 formats, or they all split it way too much.
So Leviathan and the MTGO 1v1 formats are both pretty much dead. And then French is also about half as popular as it was before Leviathan and MTGO 1v1 became a thing, and then stopped being a thing.
Just like,
so even the surviving format took a lot of damage in the aftermath.
Yeah, like
of that.
even like, it's not like you can attempt to split, and if it doesn't work out, just everybody comes back to the original and you just all live happily again. Like, you attempt the split, one of the formats dies, and those people never come back because they're burned out and they do not want to come back and relearn the old format or relearn the new format if the old format dies, right? There's so much potential to lose player base.
I don't know how much of that is,
but some of them will not.
Yeah, some of them will not come back.
You won't lose. You won't lose 100% of you'll still have people come back and forth, and like people will play both formats. People
I just don't think that people who started playing Tiny Leaders or Brawl were all of a sudden like, I'm done. I moved from EDH to Brawl or Oathbreaker or Tiny Leaders. I'm done with this. I'm done with EDH. I'm done with Magic. Like, I don't know. That seems like a bit of a...
That's a bit much, but there are definitely people who played like Leviathan and got burnt out on Leviathan because it was either being mismanaged or they didn't like the way the format was going and just decided to not play 1v1 EDH anymore.
Well, a lot of it too is that when you buy cards and you're spending money on a deck, if you can't then transfer a lot of those cards into another format easily, then it puts up a barrier to entry or to re-entry if you're trying to come back to a format.
When it comes to any radical ideas like splitting the format, there's certainly going to be a side that is the opposite radical idea, which is if you split the format, I'm not going to play the format, and that means that's a no repair situation as far as I'm concerned.
Can you elaborate on that? Sorry,
I think so. Here, let me start with an example. I think most of us started playing CDH because we were playing Commander, and you kind of you upgrade your deck. You eventually land on your competitive masterpiece, and then the competitive Commander community is like, we're going to split the format. So you have two decisions, right? Am I going to stay with Commander or am I going to stay with competitive or CDH, like the new format? And I think that decision is radical enough that if one side fails, it can't really be repaired again.
Not fully, at least, yeah. Like there's no way you get everybody back, or maybe even a majority back.
I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I think that competitive Commander is in a sense already split from Commander, right? We talk about we have separate subreddits. We talk about our competitive decks and then our non-competitive decks.
You're then splitting the split community. The already split community is the issue. So
some people will continue to play Commander competitively.
Like the whole issue is so the reason why CDH can exist is because people, even if you consider it a split from regular Commander, you get an influx of new players. The Commander player base is large enough already to support that. The amount of people that play Commander isn't going to lose a meaningful amount from the current size of the competitive format, even if they never choose to play regular Commander again.
And the inverse is also true, right? Like, splitting the format isn't going to bring in an influx of new competitive Commander players.
Yeah, you're actually, it makes it less likely for people to convert up from regular Commander to actual competitive Commander, right? Because at that point, you're crossing a very distinct line of saying, once you cross this line, the decks that you play you're not going to be able to play these decks with your friends anymore, right? You can't.
And also then you have the issue of people who reach the most competitive. I got in trouble for calling it the pinnacle before. So the most competitive form of Commander proper, then they become sort of a new format, and now you have all the CDH players who play now and go along with the split, and then 2 years later, the people who got in an arms race with their Commander play group are now playing Commander, essentially what we're playing now, they're playing 2 years in the future, and now we're in a separate format with a separate ban list, and now there's two, instead of growing, a different community grew, and we have...
Yeah, I think
you lose the funnel of people coming up the chain of power level.
Yeah, it's definitely it is a bit you do lose that ability to kind of bump someone from high power and could be like, here, come on into CDH, with your
We have cookies.
high power Tasigur deck
We
or something,
have
your
Paradox
Tasigur control
Engine.
deck.
But even not even bumping them from high power to competitive, like how like a lot of CDH pods and CDH scenes in cities are effectively like half high power, half competitive. You just don't get those pods anymore, right? You now have 2 people that play high power in a city and 3 people that play actual new format competitive. Right, so you no longer get to play those decks together, and you no longer get to play this like gradient level.
But I don't necessarily agree with that, because it does depend on how radical a split, right? If you change, like you can't jam Tiny Leaders versus Oathbreaker, right? There's no compatibility there. But depending on how you approach a split, there can still be some level of compatibility maintained. If you're not changing any of the rules or game mechanics, like if you're maintaining color identity, you're keeping commander tax, everything the same, but you only affect the ban list, that's one way to maintain some cohesion. But even further, if you make the new ban list if you make the regular ban list a subset of the new ban list, then everything that all these high power commander players or the competitive players, who are playing, Shuffle Hulk or whatever, like that would be legal. If you have it so that it's legal under the new ban list, then there is some level of compatibility that's able to be maintained.
But there's
now
wait, so you're saying we can't unban anything if we split the format?
No, you can only unban things. You can't ban things.
But then you don't have a full split at that point.
It is not a full split,
and you're
but that's a half measure.
You're still relying on the RC to ban problematic cards.
So then the card that people most want banned, Flash,
so what would the point of that split be, right? Because then you can't deal with the partners issue, and you're not dealing with the Flash issue by splitting the format. So why are you splitting the format?
Well, there's plenty of people who complain about the cards that are needlessly on the ban list.
Sure, but those don't have the impact that current cards that are legal in the format do. And unbanning cards, the desire to unban cards is not the driving force behind the people who want to split the format.
No, but it's certainly a way to bridge the gap, right? Like if you'd want to sort of ease into a split, that's probably the way to go, right? You sort of introduce.
But even easing into it, it doesn't matter how long you take to ease in and how slowly you ease into it, you still end up with the fundamental issue of you have 2 separate formats and they are incompatible. So you cannot split those, like you're splitting those small play groups in cities that can barely make pods as is. And at some point, you no longer have full pods for people to play in. Across the formats.
Another thing about the small pods is that you're in competitive the way, because it's not, you're not taking your commander deck to an LGS and playing against a bunch of random people, right? Because that's the whole point of the RC's mission with the ban list, right? I think they've stated that they would not have a ban list if not for this problem. They would rather have everything solved like kitchen table wise. But in order to facilitate this kind of, going to GPs, going to your LGS, you need some kind of ban list so that everyone has a base level understanding. But the way competitive is because competitive players are so spread out, you're basically, everyone in your play group, right? Like, so you could really kind of implement this on a kitchen table sort of scale, right? Like you don't need sort of a full-blown RC to emerge for competitive to be like, from the top down, this is the ban list, this is how everything should be run, you follow these, because you're not going to go to an LGS and there's not going to be an official CDH tournament.
So how would that quote unquote format split be different than just home ruling cards into a ban list in your local play groups? And why would then that require a format split as opposed to just telling people to home rule their play groups?
It is essentially a home rule split, but with you can add an air of I want to say authority might be a bit too harsh, but like you can pool people's collective experience and knowledge and to formulate a recommended ban list.
So you don't think that's what the RC is doing right now?
No, they are, but I'm saying that it's.
So I'm just genuinely trying to understand your suggestion. Is it that we would have a group of respected members of the competitive community get together and come up with a list of cards that they recommend competitive players allow to be legal when they play?
No. It wouldn't. I think. I don't think. I think the RC model is something that it's enfranchised right now. Like it's kind of built into the system, and if you were to redo it from like the ground up, I don't think this is where you end up. But there's just of the way that EDH itself just formed. This is kind of what was inevitable. So if you have,
I don't understand your suggestion. I just don't know what you're suggesting.
No, I'm saying you can like. There's a million different ways. I'm not suggesting an actual. Sorry,
I don't mean advocating. I just mean like you seem to have a set of ideas of something that could be done, and I don't quite understand what those ideas would entail.
Okay, so if you have like it's like I'm not sitting here with like a plan of how things should be. This is all just like mostly off the top of my head. So like what if you had a so competitive EDH is mostly organized through the subreddits, Discord groups, online for the most part, and then local play groups. Fair enough?
Okay. Yep.
The central hub for CDH really does seem to be the subreddit. So if people had, let's say, a poll, if there was a maybe a straw poll isn't the optimal way to do it. Maybe you can do some other form of poll or some other form of way to implement like a democratic solution on what people want from the ban list. But people do seem to have a somewhat unified opinion regarding certain things that should or shouldn't be banned. So, these group of like-minded players create or submit votes. The votes get, tallied up. Okay, so this is the recommended, or this is the, I don't even want to say recommended, because that implies some sort of like, rules committee type structure. But this is a ban list that, the majority of people, based off voting, would arrive at. So, like, if you want to adopt that as a suggestion for your play group, go for it. Or, I mean, you can also just adhere to the standard RC ban list as well.
I mean, this seems unlikely to yield anything, like just the tyranny of the status quo. There are large dedicated communities of people who will fight any unbanning, and not the same. Like, I would like to see Flash banned, but I would like to see it banned a lot less than certain people who play Flash Hulk would like to not see it banned.
Like, I mean, perhaps
like, I
that's
think it
how
would
things
improve
play.
Balance and diversity, and all the Flash Hulk, or many of the Flash Hulk players, think it will just kill their deck and they'll fight it at every turn. They've invested money, they've invested time.
So, I mean, it could turn out it could be that that's how things turn out. But also it could be that could just not be the case. Right? Like there would have to be a large contingent of Flash Hulk players who are, vehemently opposed to this to win on a majority vote.
I think it's rather than propose a split the format, which is really not a proposal, right? Like it's kind of like it's like here's an idea, someone else handle this idea. I'm not particularly fond of that type of approach. I think what Lyndon's suggesting is actually propose a ban list or propose a system for creating a new ban list, and just get enough people to try it. Right? You don't have to call it Commander. You don't have to not call it Commander either. Right? It's just, why don't we just try out this one idea? And there certainly are enough people who are willing to do that, right? Like, I think that's the same reason why we have the CEDH community in the first place, is because there were enough people who just were cool to try a new idea.
Yeah, I think it's a lot less. You phrased that quite well.
I think it's a lot.
I largely agree to that.
Natural than the progression towards CEDH, though, and why CEDH exists. I think that's probably the better way to do it if you are going to split the format, is to not do a hard split immediately and definitely test things out first. But I don't think that splitting the format as a whole is a great idea in general currently. That being said, it may or may not be. I'm sure many people have many opinions, and we can probably put a poll up on this on the Discord. See what you think.
Yeah, instead of in lieu of a gut check, we'll put a little poll.
We'll poll you guys
for should the format be split.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll do with SurveyMonkey. You guys can fill in all the details you want on how
you personally would split the format,
would facilitate the split,
and destroy the community. But really, I think it's a bit too early after this specific ban announcement to freak out and say we should immediately split the format and get started on that and get the ball rolling. Definitely, I personally think we should let the dust settle a bit first. See how receptive the RC is to embracing the CEDH community. I mean, really, it's only been a fairly short amount of time that there's been any real push to get the RC to acknowledge the CEDH community in general. I
wholeheartedly agree, because like the CAG was only recently just formed, and I can only imagine Shivam and Rachel have only recently started pushing for the flash ban, because the sentiment in the community has only started to become more and more uniform on that front. So, they took this long to ban Paradox Engine. Hopefully it doesn't take them that long to arrive on a decision with Flash, but we do need to give it time.
But is it Flash good?
Okay.
That's all it takes.
Does anyone have anything they want to say before we close out?
Please don't ban Hulk. Oh my god. That's the one nightmare scenario for me. That's all I ask. Yeah. Ban anything you want, just don't ban Hulk.
Competitive Commander is not dead, everyone. There is a light at the end of this tunnel.
We're still alive. Okay. We're still kicking.
Okay.
It's only a leg.
Emphasis on the kicking.
We'll all think about this and laugh.
Tis but a scratch.
It's only a flesh wound.
Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. If you guys would like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at IntoTheNorthPod, via our email, intothenorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a Patreon, we are at patreon.com/IntoTheNorthPodcast. Thank you, as always, to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, to Nate Slover for our equally lovely podcast logo, and to our podcast editor, Roadkill. The next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya.
Bye.